Each of the other pillars, as they saw, had the same sized hole, leaving them to wonder what would happen if each was filled. They decided to take a random teleporter, but it didn't send them anywhere special, so teleport back to their home. When they did, they had to get up again after the Tide Pod signal was set off. It was from their home universe, and they followed it to its location. The President of America, Godfrey G. Golden, joined the 7th Legion and informed them that everyone was very thankful for how they cleaned up the Caribbean, but they also noticed something strange. Mexican Turtle Sr.'s tomb was thought to have been destroyed by the meganuke, but when they went there, they noticed a tunnel had been dug out, and the sides were scorched. They investigated, but found nothing, and assumed Mexican Turtle Sr. had somehow resurrected and used a strange method to get out of his grave. They went to the area, and looked back in time by a few hours. The ground seemed to rumble for a second, before a massive beam shot out from it. And you know what else is massive? The low taper fade mim. Then, a skeleton, presumably Mexican Turtle Sr., rose up. He was tinted with a green hue, similar to the color of the nuclear radiation, and it looked as if he was testing out his magic abilities. He then appeared to use some sort of X-ray vision, and after looking around for a few seconds, got incredibly furious and darted himself back into the ground. A scream of ire was heard, and he emerged from the ground, before disappearing into thin air, likely having used his powers to go invisible. Back in the present, the 7th Legion investigated where he flew into the ground. They saw a large assortment of bodies, all wearing a uniform, which they identified as the uniform of Mr. Mexican Turtle's army. Mr. Mexican Turtle, however, was nowhere to be found. They looked back in time from here, and saw that his body was never here. They looked back in time all the way to when the meganuke was launched, and saw this was the meeting room of him and his army. They were discussing war plans, when a gigantic explosion went off. The bunker they were in must have been blast resistant, as instead of disintegrating them, the roof slowly crumbled and eventually collapsed in on itself, with the entire palace soon following suit and crushing them all. They continued watching, but nothing happened for a decade. However, they could suddenly hear voices talking. They recognized one as Lanrit S., another sounded like Peter Griffin did from Family Guy, the sequel to The Simpsons, a show created by Trey Parker. A third voice sounded raspy and deep, likely Barney S., and a fourth voice sounded similar to Lanrit S., although higher pitched, quieter, and clearer. This voice was identified by the former cultists as the figure S, completing the Skibidi Slicers. They talked amongst themselves, with Lanrit sounding as if he was the leader, saying that they sensed a future disturbance in this universe, which the 7th Legion assumed to be Sergei. They then talked about how, after reviewing the history of this universe, Mr. Mexican Turtle was their best guest, and that the nuclear waste might bring him back to life. Appreciating his intelligence and brutality, they decided that he should finish the Council of Three. The voices subsided, and Mr. Mexican Turtle's body faded out. This was all a bunch of wackadoodle stuff, but it cleared up that Mr. Mexican Turtle was the final member of the Council of Three, that Lanrit was the leader, and that the figure was somehow related. They decided they needed to look for Mexican Turtle Sr. as he was still likely near. They used their magic to identify his position, and went to it. He was on the moon, sitting down and looking at the Earth. The meganuke was so powerful that the waste it created gave his corpse enough power to travel to the moon. They were confused on why he didn't do this earlier, but the 7th Legion realized it was because when they cleared up the island, they actually just kinda shoved the waste deeper into the Earth, since that took less energy than removing it. Mexican Turtle Sr. must have then gotten better access to the waste, and could absorb it. They said hi, startling Mexican Turtle Sr. and causing him to try and flee. He darted away, but he was still much weaker than the 7th Legion, so they just teleported him back and froze his position. Now being able to confront him, they asked him about history, and what he was doing now. He told them things they already knew, and asked what had happened to Jamaica after he died. They told him that his son ended up being a horrible dictator that treated his people terribly, conquered surrounding areas, and formed the Jamaican Empire, but the UN eventually nuked him into oblivion. They also mentioned the conversation from the skibidi slicers they overheard, which confused Mexican Turtle seniors, so they had to explain everything with DARPA Morrill, Lanrit, the figure, the cultists, the Empire, Peter Griffin Pizza, and Barney. When they told him everything about his son, they expected him to show disgust and disappointment, but he seemed impressed and gave a faint smile, albeit one he tried to suppress. They asked him if he wanted to join them, and he agreed, but only if they promised to help him find his son. They accepted these terms, and the two of them left. He seemed very focused on finding Mr. Mexican Turtle, so they immediately went back to the hub. They teleported there, but could see Peter Griffin standing near the teleporters. They tried to go back to the teleporter, but were noticed by Peter Griffin, causing him to lasso them in with magic and keep them apprehended. He started talking to other people, telling them that he had found the intruders, and that they looked familiar, like the ones that some of them had fought near Quahog. Arising from the black pillar came Barney, the figure, and last of all, Mr. Mexican Turtle. Mexican Turtle Sr. instantly recognized his son, and told him to tell Peter to free them. Mr. Mexican Turtle, who appeared as a Tide Pod with a stereotypical Jamaican accent, hat and hair, as well as limbs adorned in military gear, did as his father said. They expected his father to start scolding his son, or at least tell him how disappointed in him he must have been. Instead, Mexican Turtle Sr. started telling how impressed he was, and that while he thought Mr. Mexican Turtle had potential, he didn't ever think he would do so good, making them begin to fear Mexican Turtle Sr. joining the skibidi slicers. Mr. Mexican Turtle kept his head down and didn't speak a word the whole time. His father continued yapping the day away, telling his son that he thought he didn't have the guts to finally massacre and destroy nations to grow an empire, and that he always took him as too soft to do so. He told him that the two of them could go back and rule Jamaica together, using his new power to take over and enslave the entire world, when suddenly, Mr. Mexican Turtle appeared to punch his father in the gut out of nowhere. Mexican Turtle Sr. looked up with widened eyes, and as his son took his arm away from his torso, a blade emitting light was shown to be sticking out. Mexican Turtle Sr. collapsed to the ground, still with a face of pure shock, and disintegrated, leaving only the blade, which appeared to be made out of the white flame. Mr. Mexican Turtle showed emotion for the first time, slowly beginning to grin, and finally looked up, with a facial expression of relief, accomplishment, and satisfaction. The 7th Legion had a lot to process, but Mr. Mexican Turtle helped. He told them that his father was not who the world thought he was. While he maintained the country, most of the good things going on were not to do with his actions, he simply made it appear that way through several methods. Much like the figure, he tricked the entire nation into believing he was a being who deserved to be worshipped, but in reality, had created a dystopia for them to live in that only appeared good. He cut off most contact with the outside world so people couldn't communicate with other nations, and had everyone in Jamaica who started to become popular through telling everyone that the government was corrupt killed off, blaming their deaths on accidents and natural causes. He attempted to form an empire just like his son did, but on top of being a poor military commander and strategist, and ruled when Jamaica was low on resources, being of great age by the time he accumulated enough. The 7th Legion still wondered about why his father called him soft, but they couldn't think about that as the figure stepped forward. He said he could sense the consciousnesses of his followers inside, and told them that they betrayed him and would die for it, but this manipulation did not work since they had their minds reset by the PowerPoint presentation. They asked if they knew Lanrit, and the Skibidi Slicers all became flustered, and frantically asked how they knew that name. They almost told them the story about fighting him in the snowy area, but realized that wouldn't be a good idea, and pleaded the Fifth Amendment. The Skibidi Slicers got angrier, and Barney tried chopping them with a limb of purple goo. While they were magically tied up, they still could move, and shifted just enough so that the attack missed them, destroying the lasso instead, and freeing them. The other members shot glares at Barney as the 7th Legion ran for the closest teleporter, but Peter Griffin simply pressed a button on his 11.5th toe, causing all the teleporters to go away. He formed a giant sword of power and leapt at them, while Barney shot blobs of goo and Mr. Mexican Turtle charged in with one of the blades he used to kill Mexican Turtle Sr. 6 looked at the fourth wall, causing a record scratch and freeze frame, and told them that, yup, that was him, and that they were probably wondering how he got into this situation. After giving a brief recap of everything up to this point in cinematic form, time continued on. They dodged Peter's attack, were grazed by Mr. Mexican Turtle's, and got hit by most of Barney's. Just from this, they already were hit into one of the invisible walls and suffered severe damages. They combined into one being, VI2, but they agreed to split back into the 7th Legion after this. Barney, with his colossal strength and seemingly boundless energy, charged forward with great force. Peter Griffin, armed with his unpredictable and chaotic nature and giggity force, darted around with erratic maneuvers. Meanwhile, Mr. Mexican Turtle cast a temporal distortion field, manipulating time itself. VI2, however, was prepared for this coordinated assault. Analyzing the situation with great speed, VI2 devised a strategy to turn the tide. As Barney's immense strength bore down upon him, VI2 not so gracefully sidestepped, using Barney's momentum against him and sending him crashing into a Mr. Mexican Turtle, cancelling out the temporal distortion field. Simultaneously, 6-2's battle-experienced mind quickly deciphered Peter Griffin's erratic patterns. With background knowledge of different fighting strategies, VI2 outmaneuvered Peter, leaving him tangled up in his own limbs. The three channeled their powers together into one beam, which VI2 ducked and deflected. The battle raged on, with all three beings attacking VI2 simultaneously, but it became evident that 6-2's skill and strategy and luck were unmatched. The Skibidi Slicers were getting angry, and revealed they each had been using only 50% of their power. They all upped it to 100%, and suddenly went invisible. VI2, even using anti-invisibility magic, couldn't detect them. They were using most of their power to achieve invisibility this effective, so they couldn't use very strong attacks. Still, they whittled down VI2 more and more. As this was going on, everybody began to realize that the figure had disappeared ever since this fight began. VI2 had been saving up his power, and used it to make a shield around himself. This shield blocked the Skibidi Slicer's attacks, but couldn't last forever. VI2 had time to think, but was too distracted by pain and the fact that the figure had slipped away when it seemed like the perfect opportunity to have fought. Then, before the shield broke, the figure reappeared in the sky, with a being that looked like the other figures did before they merged together. They realized this must mean that everything aligned perfectly for another figure to have appeared. The other members were distracted by this, so VI2 went as far away as possible. The figures merged together, and reopened the teleporters, as they planned to go somewhere after killing VI2. They decided to join in the fight, and went with the Skibidi Slicers to VI2. VI2 had simply looped back around, but had an epiphany. While Darpamoral and Thuots were surely done with giving him power, Kot was still left. As he got back to the teleporters, he called on Kot, told him what was happening, and asked for power. Kot decided to do something even better, and outright made himself a controllable form and teleport to Vi2, joining the 7th Legion. Peter and Barney, who recognized him, froze up in fear. Mr. Mexican Turtle stopped in awe of his despicableness, and while all three were frozen, Kot used an attack that used all of its energy, a massive beam of unspeakable power, knocking out and nearly killing all three targets. And you know what else is massive? The low taper fade meme. The figure now looked as if he thought he made a mistake, but Kot had used up almost all his power, only having saved enough to heal up Vi2, which he did, as well as merging with Vi2. Vi2 now went on the offensive. Blades of pure energy clashed with tendrils of darkness, creating ripples that echoed through the void. 6-2's every strike was fueled by the memories of those lost to the figure's reign of terror. The figure, in turn, unleashed torrents of malevolence, aiming to obliterate the warrior who dared to challenge its supremacy. Their battle raged on, each combatant pushing the other to their limits. 6-2's armor cracked, and the figure's form wavered, but neither relented. With a final surge of strength, Vi2 managed to land a devastating blow, severing the figure's core and casting the deity into a newly created pit of cosmic fire. Exhausted but triumphant, Vi2 stood over the smoldering remains of the figure, believing the battle to be won. For a moment, it seemed as though peace had been restored. However, as Vi2 turned to absorb the figure's body, a sinister whisper echoed through the air. From the final part of his life, the figure's essence reformed, healing himself slightly. With one final, desperate attack, the figure lashed out, engulfing Vi2 in a storm of darkness and light. The five of them, now all on the verge of death, lay exhausted and sprawled out across the plain. They all wanted to deal the final blow, but Vi2 had no option other than to retreat into the void pillar and teleport back, as he would die any second now and desperately needed to go home to heal. The Skibidi Slicers had nowhere near enough energy to follow him, or even to move, so they stayed resting on the ground, now knowing about the 7th Legion's teleporter. Vi2 went to their healing pod, and managed to recover well enough to separate back into the 7th Legion. They went straight back to the hub, hoping to finish off the Skibidi Slicers, but in the time they had while the 7th Legion recharged, they too recovered and pulled themselves into a different teleporter, plotting their usage of the 7th Legion's teleporter. Going back home, the 7th Legion heard news of a local hero who saved 16,491 orphans, 5,728 puppies, 9,710 kittens, 2,943 grandparents, and 33,910 other people. This was pretty cool, so they did some research on him. They found that this was just one of his good deeds, and he had done millions of other great things across his multiverse, and had essentially never done a single remotely bad thing in his life, with only one negative action. This single action outweighed everything good he ever did, and was so atrocious it rendered him pure evil. This action, of course, was disliking Paper Mario Color Splash. The 7th Legion just couldn't understand this. Like, Paper Mario Color Splash should be everybody's favorite Paper Mario game, I'm sorry. Sure, TTYD is actually better, but better things don't have to be your favorite. Color Splash is easily the funniest Paper Mario game, and it has incredible music and art. The story is simple but captivating, and most of the gameplay is amazing. The game itself is very creative and original, while Huey is the greatest thing to ever occur on this planet. I can give you one thing, though, that yes, the battle system is far from great. Still, even the battle system is overhated, People treat it like it is the worst thing to ever exist, when it's just kinda mid. One tiny part being slightly below average doesn't ruin a game. It was disadvantaged from the start, with TTYD fans already hating the recently released Sticker Star, which, to be fair, actually is terrible, so when they saw that Color Splash was remotely similar to Sticker Star, they ignored everything that made it great with a negativity bias. Anyway, after this event, they found the local hero and punished him. They threw him into a torture chamber beyond time where he is all alone and in constant pain, but is immortal for all eternity. Hooray! Pizza party! They then found Midak and Za Bath, and he joined them, also giving them some real Egyptian silk. They decided to go on an adventure to find some more members, so they just started traveling towards beings with similar power levels. The first one they found was a mysterious guy, a chill guy, if you will, perhaps even a chill guy who Loki doesn't give a flying flapjack. This guy was so chill his chillness radiated off, and he was so chill he made the 7th Legion 0.00001% less chaotic, and he was so chill he killed a family of 4 in 2017, and he was so chill he let them kidnap him and force him into their group. The next found some dude in his mom's basement, who was crashing out. He was wearing a strange mask, so they bullied him, but he told them what the point of the mask was. This point of the mask was so sad that they cried all over the place and let him into the 7th Legion. Getting carried away, they may have done some not so great things, which got the internet very angry. They knew they had to make an apology, so they made one with a ukulele where they vaguely claimed innocence without addressing any controversy. This was so inspirational that Logan Paul joined them. They went into a universe, and found a real no-good criminal causing some mischief. They were about to stop him, but suddenly a boy started flying at 0.5 miles per hour towards them. He shot lasers out of his eyes, which slightly stung the guy's skin. Then, some middle-aged guy walked up, and just started watching. It was night here, and when it turned to midnight, the middle-aged guy suddenly grew massive muscles, flew up to the scoundrel, and uppercut him into the sun. And you know what else is massive? The low taper fade meme. They went up to these two heroes, who introduced themselves as Wednesday Man and Mediocre Boy. Wednesday Man is just a regular person, but on Wednesdays he gets powerful abilities. Mediocre Boy is his sidekick, and he has a vast array of powers, but they all aren't very good. They joined the 7th Legion, and asked if they could get some help on something. They were part of a fairly large superhero team called the Very Useful Guys, but all the other members got brainwashed by Dr. Doofenshmirtz, and, for some reason, the only way to unbrainwash them was to beat them.